Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the final January meeting of 2025. Our next meeting is February 13th. Got it. Will everybody please stand for the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have one fill application for review. Any comments? Anybody with that application? That's Philip Sherrill, 109 Seafield Lane. How are you? Do we have any comments on this? Did everybody do their homework?
Yep, we're happy to pay for it.
Okay.
Make a motion to accept the resolution as written.
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
That's it.
Aye.
Nice to see you.
Thanks
for coming up.
Thanks for stopping by.
All right, we're going to go out of order on the site plan review. We're going to take 128 Main Street first this afternoon at the applicant's request.
Great. Good evening. Gabby Chillinger, an architect, representing 128 Main Street. Thank you for hearing our application again this evening. We went before the Architectural Review Board this week, and they found our project satisfactory and conform to the aesthetics of the environment. So they gave us their blessing.
And Chairman Manassian did share a recommendation with us as well, and it was favorable.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. I believe Ron, engineer, had some comments, and Kevin, my client, is here with me. We had also reached out to our engineer today and got some clarification. So I'm going to have Kevin step in and respond to some of the comments that were written.
Members of the board. At the last meeting, it was requested that we update the site plan and submit a revised grading and drainage plan, as well as a photometric plan, which we did submit to the village engineer. Village engineer was kind enough to provide us some comments that if we have 2 minutes, we can go through and see which ones we can check off and which ones you might need us to update and resubmit if necessary. One of the initial comments Mr. Hill had was that we want to, and I think we discussed this at the last meeting and we had no objection to it. And I think the site plan does make note to it, but the grading and drainage plan may not. But we do have signage to implement a one-way no entry onto the drive aisle entering onto Main Street. So that will be a one-way from Main Street to the rear of the building with no access from the rear of the building back to Main Street at the board's request. So that notation and location of signage aren't currently on the site plan. We'll make reference to that, and if you want it shown on the grading and drainage plan, we can, but it is on the site plan, but not on the drainage. We also submitted a photometric plan, which shows a photometric calculation of 0.7, which is just under the 0.8 maximum, but at an average of 0 versus the 0.2 minimum, because we provided ample lighting at the parking area, the ADA access area, the walkway area, and the rear of the building. But there is some throw from that light that doesn't provide for some lighting in the drive aisle where there is a 5-foot right-of-way between us and the neighboring property. So we're open to the board's suggestions or Mr. Hill's suggestions on if there's some lighting in some areas that you would like to see that we could add that don't put us over the 0.8 or that would allow us to.
Your lighting guy really has to do that. Not only with the little light on that basement area, there's also light in the back as you go out by the dumpster area. A lot of zeros there too. But I don't know how to, it really takes a lighting guy to lay that out. So who's ever running your photogrammetric program and do that as his design is to
Yeah, I think you had mentioned the last meeting that you didn't expect us, or I guess a lot of people on Main Street, to be able to meet the photometric calculation requirement in the code. Is there
Not
something we
quite.
should focus on? Is there a so we kept all throw from onto Main Street, so we have no lighting coming off the property of Main Street or the neighboring buildings. Given the parking area between the two properties and the inability to put a lamppost in the right of way.
I think I'd like to see, point two over the whole thing. I mean, I don't like the fact that it, may go over 8 because of that, but I would be, don't worry about the uniformity ratio as much.
There are, on one of your elevation, is showing 4 sconces on the west side, but those don't show up on the photometric.
But that's in the drive aisle, right?
Yeah.
I think I noticed that as well. So we'll make sure.
That'll probably help you out.
Help on
because
that
that's-
side, yeah.
So we'll update that plan. We'll get that over to you. If necessary, we'll reach out to you to see if we're having any issues trying to meet the minimum scenario given the parking lot and the location of the easement. The Yep, R&M, we have no issue. We'll update the plan, submit to you a revised grading showing the cleanouts and showing the grading to those grates being satisfactory for that grade area. All those calculations work. We'll get that over to you. That's not an issue.
Fine, but, if it was the septic tank or that first, the way you put it in the open grates, I expect those to get cleaned out, minimize the smell.
Yep, not a problem. And we'll make that note. We'll update that and
The other thing is, well, it asked also for a detail on what your sidewalk and paving is, just so we make sure.
yes, that was my next comment. That's going to be a concrete sidewalk and a concrete access to the ADA parking space. We'll update that note with a detail so you know what that material is and what that detail is going to be. Would you like is something different or?
No, concrete's fine for the sidewalk. I would think that may be a little much for the parking space. It's a little more expensive than I think you need to do. It needs to be something hard that a wheelchair can
Correct. Yep.
ride over, but,
Leave that concrete alone.
okay.
Concrete's just fine.
Okay. That's I'm always happy to value engineer the project with you at any.
Yeah, well, you may want to look at that. Ask RM about that. And the other thing was just some indication that the open grates are gonna be at the low spots.
Yes, we'll make that note. Yep.
You don't have to go establish, a grading consistent with survey. You just then show that there are low spots there in some numerical thing. You've already got a couple of grades shown in the basin that's out there, so you could reference off of that.
Okay. Yep, that's fair enough. You make note too that the access aisle between us and the municipal lot in the rear has always been approximately 14 to 16 feet. We'll keep that, as you mentioned, that should stay the same.
You can only make that better.
Yeah, it'll never be less than that. So that'll stay and we'll notate that on the plan. I think the only item then of the comments
It's just
that we'd like to discuss with the board is the comment regarding the parking spaces.
Before you get into that, my comment on that is based on my memory. And we haven't been able yet to find the prior decisions.
Right. Neither have we.
So, for the board's information, I think there may have been, you have to kind of weigh it. Were there existing parking spaces there? And if there were, then new parking is required. If you kind of determine after looking at everything, no parking existed in the back there, then proposed is fine. You may want to comment on the history.
Yes.
Well, I think to the best of my personal recollection, having driven back there on numerous occasions, there was no identified parking that I was aware of.
Well, you couldn't, the thing is, you can't really mark on gravel.
No.
And expect.
But I mean, the chaos of the vehicles there simply lended itself to whatever guy got there first.
We're gonna bring order to that chaos now. So I think the way that we've laid out the site plan and the understanding is that there's no history of a site plan on record or any parking spaces existing. So we've updated the site plan at your request last meeting to properly show the existing square footage of each floor, the proposed square footage of each floor, and then the proper calculation of what the existing condition parking would have been in a normal situation. The fact that there is no parking, and then the 773 square foot addition in the rear, which would require 3 parking spaces, and we are proposing 5. So we have 4 spaces and an ADA space that ties into the concrete and the ADA entrance in the rear. So from a clarification standpoint, we meet all of those requirements, and we don't continue any of the existing nonconformance or anything greater than that. So all we'd ask for tonight, I think we're going to be scheduled for a public hearing. We can provide the updates on the noting and the grading and drainage plan and the photometrics to Mr. Hill. There may be something we need to just work out or maybe coordinate on where light post may or may not go to meet that. But if we could have the board's recommendation that, we may have approval subject to a satisfactory photometric plan from the village consultant and then get through the public hearing, that would be our request tonight.
Well, we're gonna do the public hearing before we obligate ourselves to determination.
You can't. I mean, I don't think you can give a determination.
Okay, so then we'll just do, or we have a.
So we'll see you on the 13th, and I think it sounds like you've got all the ducks in a
Yep.
row.
Just make sure, try and get the submission in for February 3rd. Where are we with wastewater?
Everything has been submitted. I've spoken to Matt at DPW twice, and he, I spoke to him last about a week ago, and he said he had no issue. He looked at the plan. I dropped it off in person and spoke to him on the phone. He said no increase in even though there's a small increase in square footage, it's no increase in, no change in use or occupancy, same number of residential apartments, same type of dry use retail. He has no issue with the plan, and he said we should have it in 2 weeks, a week ago. So hopefully I'll have it before the next meeting.
Just a quick point of clarification. It's probably just a matter of perspective, but on sheet S4, showing the front elevation, it appears from that there's much more roof than is depicted on the photo that you have shown over there. It's just a matter of how you're looking at the building.
The artist's misconception.
Yes, sir. It's the
Because it looks,
perspective.
on this, it looks like there's a hell of a lot more roof that you'd see.
Right. So that rendering that you're looking at is a perspective point from an angle of repose from across the
curb.
street. Yes, sir. So,
It's one and the same, it's just how you look at it.
that's correct. That's correct. Quite honestly, when it's built, it won't look as obnoxious because you'll never see that in a 2D plane. Your eye will always project that 18-foot height.
Because on this sheet, looks like there's gonna be a lot, it looks like there's a heck of a lot of roof going on there front that you're gonna see, so just wanna make sure
Correct.
that we're talking about. the same.
Yeah, that's a true front elevation.
Okay, so we'll see you at the next meeting.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, first on the site plan review agenda is Quantuck Beach Club. No go? Okay.
Pine Barn.
No one.
Oop.
Yeah, we're
No revision B.
on January 9, my friend.
Oh, the print is so nice.
Back to the future.
All right. Pine Barren LLC. You supposed to be working on a hotel down the block here? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
See him in another 6 months.
name's Nancy Larkin with Bennett and Reed, offices at 212 Windmill Lane in Southampton, and Rick Searles, the project architect is here this evening. We had submitted revised plans with the board a few weeks ago. I guess in response to comments that had been raised and questions regarding the zone boundary on this property, we had actually revised the plan to include a 25-foot buffer along the northern part of the property. I received just yesterday, I guess, comments from Mr. Hill on the project. Mr. Hill's comments had acknowledged that buffer that was established along the on the northern property line. Commented on the size of the building, but it does mention in here, and I think it's important to note that this property doesn't have a conforming building envelope, so regardless of what we're building, we're going to the zoning board of appeals for what will be built on this property. The building itself that is proposed is at a greater front yard setback than the existing building on the property. Parking is proposed along the frontage on Pine Street, but I believe there is parking along road frontages, including on the Circle M Beverage across the street. The property owner would be willing, obviously, to landscape along the road frontage where those parking spaces are proposed. Comments were also raised with respect to the 5 feet along the southern property line from parking to the property line, but it's actually just the loading bay.
Well, you've got our experts' comments.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through those, Britton and Ron?
Sure, my comments were, mostly on all the information that we don't have, such as use, narrative, type of business, number of tenants. Is it storage, is it office? It's hard to evaluate the proposal as presented just because we have limited details. Develop floor plans, site landscaping, lighting. It's just hard to make a lot of comments because this is a pretty, pared down submission. So we kind of just need to check the boxes of what will be required. You know, there's no finishes, materials, square footages. Gotta be, I go over with you for
Yeah. So it will be a 1-tenant building is proposed as storage, warehouse facility. Can give you that information.
So one tenant has 6 different garage bays?
Correct.
In the previous work session, we talked about the loading dock, we'd be able to serve the entire building and it would not be divided up, I think. I recall that correctly. This floor plan matches the original submission. It hasn't changed.
Code says 50-foot front yard setback and a 50-foot, rear yard setback. The property is about 100 feet or less, so theoretically you can't fit buildings. The proposal now has a 27% density of coverage. And the code requires 20. And here's a property that arguably it's gonna need relief to fit something on it. But I don't think it should be
A maximum.
something that goes past the max. I think that's an overreach. The other thing I didn't like about it is, Burlington, is they put their parking right up against the property line. And I don't think that's something we should have. I think we need that 10-foot buffer against the road.
Well, we'd be looking for landscaping there too, as
Yeah,
Lucas
so
mentioned.
you need the 10-foot so you can have the landscaping on the site across the street. This is all pre-existing, non-conforming. We made it as good as we can. Here we're talking about an entirely new building on a site. So I think we have to have a better plan that's gonna fit those constraints. Granted, you're gonna have to give on the front and rear yards. You have to, but it's really up to the building. And I'm not sure that they need to develop a plan more as far as, meet certain because of the zoning board.
Yeah, I don't think we're anywhere near ready for the zoning board.
Too many constraints on, we don't know what the zoning board will actually give them.
I mean, warehousing unto itself is not a permitted use in B two. I don't foresee them trying to get a use variance, so the case has to be made that this is part and parcel to the occupancy across the street.
Mhm.
Circle out there. So with that, I think that opens up if that's what everyone agrees, the applicant and all the boards involved, there's a question whether there should even need to provide parking on this particular site. Because we don't really want the public coming to this site if it's gonna operate in the way we believe it's gonna operate.
But what about the future? I mean, will this property always be part of the beverage business? And don't we have to look at that eventuality? That a tenant could wind up there and not have any parking?
That's a question.
That's partially a question for the zoning board. I mean, I think we're kind of going around in circles because what Britton pointed out is we don't have anything to base this discussion on. Like, Brad, that there's some proposed connection to the property across, but where's that in the record? Like, you guys need to make a proposal as to exactly what use this building's gonna be. If you want it to be connected to the property across the street, make that explanation so that Brad can figure out what variances you need. We can all figure out whether it makes sense, and then when you go to the zoning board or not, that will be the point where we figure that out, but we don't have enough information to do that.
Still have to rectify the zone line, which is a trustee's function. My zoning map does not match with this site plan.
Understood.
Yes, and we have.
But let's
filed a
assume
letter.
that's gonna happen, because I think we all, expect that to take place. That's not your biggest issue. Right now, you got a big box with a use that's not permitted on a parcel that right now you would need area variances, coverage variances, and a use variance. So, I mean, we're wasting our time if you don't come in with an explanation how this makes sense. I think.
See you again real soon.
I would make another comment that if the site really needs to be cleaned up. With pallets laying all over the place and that the storage container that may or may not be lying partially in village property.
We have the owner present, so maybe a subtle hint to him.
Yeah.
I don't know the last time you saw that, but all the files are gone.
I was by there.
Before you
about-
got here tonight.
I moved all the blue pallets and everything like that, and there is a shipping container on the property. That thank God is not on village property, but yes, it is tight there, but that just has storage. Okay, that's not a problem.
Shouldn't be there, period.
I mean, I'll say this, the concept, if you do wanna make this accessory to the other property, there's some legal ways we can do it to tie the two properties together by covenant and deed, but, you gotta make that case, I think.
There are also building code implications for that. If it's not part of the other property, like we said, you're gonna have to have some sort of conditioned space, a bathroom, sanitary system on site. Where if it's part and parcel to an adjacent use, it can be a different classified building that doesn't need all those.
And to me, the way it looks, I mean, it could tentatively be a number of separate business uses. It's by the design, in my opinion.
That's not the design that is there. The issue becomes, once you load a building, sense to feed
Oh, yeah.
those products.
I understand the need, yeah.
So that's why, for me, it's easy. I don't need to open up the whole building if I just need to get water out of one side.
Yeah.
If the Coke is in the opposite side, I can open up that bed.
I understand the need, but you
Oh,
can
okay.
understand the perception.
I
And
understand.
somebody driving by it won't know that it's you
Well, then,
necessarily.
the building
And then down the line.
Yeah.
If you don't
have the building, own it, somebody else takes it, doesn't take much of a leap.
To throw up dividers in it and have
Stick
5
differences.
uses there, or whatever.
I understand your concern. Yeah.
So we're gonna give you a more detailed floor plan elevations. I'm sorry, I did not get your comments, Britton. I could get them from you.
Narrative. Oh, you didn't get my comments?
I did not, so,
They're from March.
oh, all right.
I just recirculated the same ones because it didn't seem like they were, but I'm happy to send them to you again, or Megan can.
That would be great. And then we'll give you more detailed floor plans and elevations, and we'll give you also a narrative on the proposed use and how it would tie into the adjacent property as well for the next meeting, hopefully. Okay, thank you.
Beaver Lake Development, 36 Sunset Avenue. Mr. Hafley, Happy New Year.
Yes, it is. Richard T. Hafley, 48 F Main Street, West Hampton Beach. You issued a report in October regarding this piece of property. And the main issue I have with reference to that report or anything else, we don't know what we're gonna do with the property. We have the largest undeveloped piece of property in the B1 district. We gave the village a easement to allow the sewage system pipe to go along our southerly property line across the street to connect to the patio buildings and the others. We believe that once there's an expansion to the sewer system, we would be part of that. And if we are part of that, then the limitation on the number of uses we can have on a property would come under the zoning code as opposed to the health department code right now. Under the health department regulations, we would be entitled to, at the most, 2 lots. If we don't have to deal with the health department because we're part of the sewer system, we could have 8, 9 lots, 10 lots, somewhere every 2,000 square feet. So we can't give you an estimate or show you what we're going to do with the property because we don't know what we're going to do with the property, other than the fact that, excuse me, that we want to develop this portion of the property at this point in time. So I can't answer the questions that you want. It's impossible right now for me to do so. If we could develop it, if we could develop it even over 2, we'd have to pay Pine Barren credits. Why should we pay all that money when we believe that since the sewer district pipe is on our property, once it is expanded, once it goes into effect completely, we will be part of the sewer, we would be part of the sewer system, which would allow us to have a greater number of uses, 1 for every 2,000 square feet. So we can't really give you an answer to that. What we want to do is we want to try to develop this piece of property and continue to own the other piece of property. As far as the parking is concerned, I'm not sure how you can require, we're adjacent to a piece of property that's an office building in the B1 district, and we're right next to their parking. I don't know how you can require us to have a 10-foot setback in the B1 district where all the properties on either side are all business properties. If in fact you did a computation of what is, in the B1 district, you're required to have 2,000 square feet and a lot width of 60 feet. If you required a person to have a 10-foot setback, together with what the parking each parking space would have to be, there'd be very limited area that you could put a building in. The 10-foot setback is applicable if the property in question is adjacent to residential property. This property is not adjacent to residential property. All the properties in this area on Sunset Avenue are in the business district. There are other properties on Sunset Avenue that are in the business district that have parking up to their property line, but they don't have it opened up so the other pieces of property can use it. So I don't think the 10-foot setback requirement should be applicable in the B1 district where all of the properties around it are in the B1 district. As far as the parking, we have things we have to make changes to the plan. I'm not disputing we don't have to make changes to the plan, but I can't give you what we're going to do with the rest of it because we have no idea what we're going to do with the rest of it. We want to be able to move forward with this piece of property without having to go further. As when and if we find out what we're going to do with it, we will deal with it at that point in time. As far as you requiring us to give you an easement over the property to Sunset Avenue from the village's parking lot, we're willing to do that, provided the village provides us with insurance to make sure if there's an accident that occurs on that right-of-way area, the village insurance company would cover it. You can't expect the property owner to be responsible for.
We're not, nobody's ever asked for an easement. We're not asking for an easement.
You
over your
did, the
property.
first time, no,
We're not.
don't tell me that. The first time around, you asked for an easement, I told you you
And
couldn't get an easement.
I clarified that we're not asking for an easement. I've clarified that 6, 7, 8
No,
times.
no, you haven't.
I have.
Okay.
Well,
No,
let
you
it be clarified now.
I'll
then.
clarify
I
it again.
understand you don't want an easement, you want access.
We want you to have access. We want you to have access to that parking lot, so your people can get out that way and
That-
your people can come in. It's not an easement for the village's benefit.
Yes, it is, because the village people would then come across our property to Sunset Avenue.
How's it different than the access on Sunset Avenue?
Excuse me?
How's that different than the access on Sunset? Avenue?
Because it would be limited to our people that are using our
The
property.
same thing.
No, it's not the same thing. It's not even close to the
Well,
same thing.
then-
But what I'm saying to you is we would be willing to do that, provided you would provide us with insurance. If a person who is not using our property, is using the village parking lot, comes across that and has an accident, why should my client be responsible for any liability? It should be the village's responsibility. That's all I'm asking for. You have enough problems with you don't
All right,
have you don't even have the parking in the B1 district that you're required to have now, that most of those properties can have wet uses. Every one of them would have to come to you for variances.
Okay. You've got 3 memos. You got a memo from Brad, the building inspector. You got a memo from Britton, the planner, and you got a memo from Ron Hill. All of which list out a whole bunch of things that they've asked for. I don't think we've gotten any of them. If you're saying you're not providing it,
It's not
Then-
that
then
I'm
say
not
that.
providing, I'm saying I can't provide it. How can I provide you with what we're going to do with property that we have no idea what we're going to do with it?
you can, I can tell you the answer to that.
What is the
You
answer?
do what everybody else does, which is provide a concept of what's permitted today. That's all. You don't have to predict the future. You don't have to predict
We
the-
have to spend
that-
all the money to show what we're going to do today,
conceptually. how it would
conceptually,
work.
and then
Yes.
all of a sudden we can do a lot more with the property. Why do we have to
Then
show
wait.
conceptually?
Then wait.
Why do we have to
Then you
wait?
can
Mr.
wait.
Haefely, Mr. Haefely,
That's your choice.
I have calmed down.
well, but you're yelling.
No,
Please
I
stop.
have calmed down. Okay?
You've been asked for this information. You can say you're not going to provide it, and then you'll get a decision. That's all I can say to you. They're asking for information, and you're just saying, we're not giving it to you because.
I didn't say that. I didn't say
You
we
did
weren't
say-
going to give you information. That's not what he said. I said you're not entitled to come across our property or have the village people come across our property. But we will allow that to happen, provided you provide us with insurance. That's all.
That's one issue out of, I mean, I got 3 memos here
But
that have a ton of
this-
issues
this
that you've
issue
been
of the
asked to
parking on our
provide.
piece of- Why do we have to require a 10-foot setback for the parking on our property when we're right next to another piece of property that has parking?
Then your response should just be, we're not providing it. Then just say that, because you gotta make it clear, if there's a memo out there that's saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it lists all the requirements, come back and say, I'm not giving you this, I'm giving you this, I'm not giving you this, okay? Just make it clear what you're providing and what you're not
I
providing.
sent a letter back to the village and I didn't get a response to the village. How am I supposed to give you information as to what I'm going to do with property when there is a sewer system involved that changes the entire complexity of what my property what I can do with my property? That's all I'm asking.
There's no sewer system right now.
There is a sewer system.
It doesn't affect your property. It's not part of the sewer system.
Wait a second. I have an easement. The sewer system has come across my property, across it.
Are you in the sewer
And we
district?
haven't been paid for that. We gave it to them.
Are you in the sewer district?
No, we're not in the sewer
So
district.
then you don't have access to the sewer system.
No, we don't have it today. But I have to assume that once there's an expansion, which everybody says there's going to be, we would be part of it.
this board can't deal with assumptions like that. If you want to wait, that's
I
fine.
understand that, but
can wait.
you're asking me
Can
to
wait.
come up, how am I gonna come up with a plan and say I'm gonna do this when I don't know what I'm
You
gonna
have to
do?
wait until it's part of the sewer district then.
No, I don't have to wait. I'm
Okay,
entitled, I'm
you're
entitled
right.
to come in
You're right.
here.
I'm sorry. I
Well,
stand
then you
corrected.
provide us with a conceptual plan for what would be permitted today. And if things change in the future, then we worry about it then. But you can't just leave a blank space on a map and say, work with this.
We don't know what we're doing. It's not gonna fly.
How does the board plan for whatever is going to happen to that rest of the property if you wouldn't even show a concept of how it works, how it could work? You don't need 5 uses. There's another use there that could happen on that other part of the property. And it's one property, Mr. Haefely.
It's one
not-
piece of property.
It's not two. You keep talking about it as if we want to just go forward with this property and save the other property for later. It's one property. So the board has to look at it as one property. We have to know, how many curb cuts are you asking? Are you asking for
Excuse me?
2 curb cuts
Uh,
onto Sunset? We don't know because you won't show the board what you're proposing for the other side.
There's gonna be one access to it.
But then
It's
what are you
showing-
gonna
it's
do with
showing-
the
it's
other
showing
side?
Showing the one access.
You gonna file a covenant that leaves the rest of that property vacant forever? No.
No, of course not.
So then how is this board supposed to evaluate your proposal?
I don't understand. We put the property, we put the building on the northerly side of the property so that we could develop just the northerly side of the property. And now you want me to come up with a plan showing what we can do with the rest of the property as it currently is zoned, which is a B1, and a B1 district permits uses and at 2,000 square feet. But the health department doesn't allow us to do that.
But you have a single piece of property, which you're basically saying, I want to do this on one half, but I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do on the other half, but plan it. Subdivide the property and then just build on the one.
Yeah, if you end up subdividing the property, then you're gonna end up with 2 curb cuts onto Sunset, right? Because the way it's set up now,
No.
the way it's set up now, you wouldn't be able to do it
Now you're
without.
telling- So now
I
you're
didn't-
telling us that
the-
you're gonna have one curb cut for the entire property, which means the two properties, not even, the two sections of the single property are gonna have to work together somehow. But
Exactly.
we don't know how they're gonna work together because
Because you don't know what's there.
You can't or won't show us. I don't know which it is. So it makes it a planning impossibility. I think your best bet is subdivide the property, build the wing that we wanna build, and then worry about the other one later.
Or come up with a concept that works. You don't have to fully engineer the entirety of
That's
it.
contemporary.
Just come up with a concept that works, that shows how you fit whatever uses you want to fit on it with a parking lot that has 1 curb cut onto Sunset, not multiple curb cuts. I don't know, I'm just, you're leaving the board and the planners and the engineer and the building inspector with a situation where it's impossible to evaluate this half application because they don't know what the rest of the property could be used for because you won't show it to them. Show them a concept.
Fine. I will show them a concept of what can be done. And as far as the parking is concerned. But then we also have the issue, you have the issue as far as we have to be set 10 feet off as far as the parking is concerned. And I'm asking you, why is that in the middle of the B1 district when no other properties have it? There isn't another piece of property in the center of the B1 district that has a 10-foot setback from the property line, except if the property is adjacent to residential property, and this is not adjacent to it. Every piece of property on the east side of Sunset Avenue in this area has parking up to the limits of their property line. And this, and their plan says I have to be 10 feet off.
Section was amended in 2020.
What?
The local law 7 of 2020 is the section you want to refer to, which shows the 10 feet. You need a 10 feet buffer unless you are proposing cross
I
access.
understand that, that's the section.
We are asking why nowhere else in the downtown has that. You know full well, a lot of else in the downtown was developed a long way prior to 2020. That's why. That's the
Or
answer.
they may have agreed to cross that.
Or they agreed to cross.
Excuse me, I can't hear.
They may have agreed to cross access.
You don't have to provide the 10 feet if you provide
No,
cross
If
access.
they agreed to cross access, then why are there fences preventing that from happening?
It's just a
Predate-
hypothetical.
Because
Code.
it may predate the code.
Excuse me?
or Only one property may have the
That's not the case. There are properties right adjacent to this that have parking up to the property line and a fence around it, so it can't be used by anybody else, okay?
Oh, if only they've agreed,
Excuse me?
if only they've agreed to the joint access, it doesn't get cut through until the other party agrees.
Yeah, you're gonna have to be much more specific about it, because you're talking generalities. We don't know of any circumstance after 2020 where that law that he recited, that was adopted in 2020, has been violated. You're asking for the
You want me
first
to
time.
show you? I'll show you.
Go ahead, that's fine. Bring some example in if you want. That's okay. Make a case, and if you wanna ask for a variance from the zoning board for a 0 setback where 10 feet's required, you're entitled to ask
I'm
for
asking
it.
a very simple question. You're in the center of the B1 district. Why do you require a 10-foot
Because it's required by the
setback?
code. It's not this board that's requiring it. It's required by the code.
It's required by the code unless there's a possibility that it will be used with the adjacent properties.
Unless cross-access is provided. That's what the
Granted,
code says.
But it's not provided. There are properties in this village that were
Need
approved
those
subsequent-
examples.
Yeah,
You want me to give you an
if you want to
example?
make a case that the village has disregarded the law after
Since
2020,
Yep.
make that case. But right, that's the law. That's on the books, Mr. Haefely, and this board has to follow
It
it.
was on the book.
You can ask for a
When did
variance.
the law become effective 1920?
2020.
2020.
Huh?
2020.
5 years ago. 2020.
Fine, I can show that. Okay, very good. I will.
Mr. Haefely, moving forward, if you could, if you're not gonna make a meeting and you're on the agenda, would you at least give us a call?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Moving forward, if you're on the agenda and you're not gonna make a meeting, would you please call and ask for an adjournment?
When did I not do that?
November.
When did I not do that?
November,
It wasn't on in November. I was not notified.
okay. Okay. Good night.
Good night, Mr. Haefely.
I know.
All right, 104 Hamptons LLC, 104 Main Street.
Cross 4 and 5 together, right, Brett?
Yeah, I did my comments. I mean, they are two separate properties, but they're both are owned by the same ownership group, but I think, the applicant here is prepared to speak for both, if that's okay.
Yeah. Hi,
We don't have anything.
good evening.
Evening.
I did make the submission on behalf of the owners. My name is Michael Albert. And I did read the comments by Planner Bistrian and by Engineer Hill. And I wanted to address the initial concerns, which was that we didn't submit anything other than the site plan and the footprints and one elevation sketch of the proposed addition to 104. But the first comment is that at a meeting with the chief building inspector, we were told that 50% lot coverage is a permitted activity, is a permitted lot coverage, and the proposals both do not exceed that. So as per zoning, the 50% lot coverage is being met on both 104 and what is being termed number 5, Glover's Lane, that seems to have 2 addresses. It's also known as 3 Glovers. And with regard to 3 Glover's Lane, it was perceived that it was to be a 2-story addition, but it's not. It's a single-story, 1-bedroom apartment. And the concept is to do it in the same architectural style and face it towards Glover's Lane with the entrance to the rear of the proposed addition. which is adjacent to the park. And that proposed apartment will have approximately a little under 5 foot of setback. Now, both parcels are 0 lot line, so that these additions can go up to the lot line. And that apartment is set to be a little under 5 foot in for access around all 4 sides of the building. Now, on the proposed addition to 104, that would go to the lot line, which is shared with the park. And so the question of how would that blend? So the idea is to not put in a traditional foundation, that both of these additions would be on piers, structural helical piles, and there would be no basement. And so in terms of the park, the idea to not disturb anything on the property line, which is a row of privet on the park property line at 104. So that becomes the difficulty, really. It's plant material. My background is in horticulture, and to say that there are numerous plant solutions to feather a structure to the ground. There are 2 types of plantings, and in fact, one in particular is actually in use on the back of the Douglas Elliman building, which is a very heavy lattice with the vining hydrangea. But there are 2 espalier plants, plants that are cultivated to be flat. So right now, the privet that's along that entrance to the park is voluminous. It's quite wide, and that too can be sheared too. Privet is very malleable. So the idea of building the 104 edition, it's only going to be 1 story. That's very important. It's not 2-story. Sure.
Sanitary system that's here now, are you building on top of it?
Well, see, that's the other part that Ms. Bistrian had mentioned. Both of those buildings and both of those lots are connected to the sewers. I did that in April and May of this year. And also, I know it's not completely apparent, but there's only 1 downspout that I couldn't get from the front east corner of Douglas Elliman. So all the other downspouts were tied in to the existing leaching galleys that were on the premises. And we'll do the calculations, but I have more than enough leaching area for that stormwater recovery. So, and the benefit of building on piers is that we can still use those leaching galleys. We don't have to take them out. So when we hooked into the sewers, we made sure to repurpose the leaching galleys. So it was pretty good. I just missed 1 downspout at that front eastern quarter of Elliman, and I probably can get to that too. So, and I know you couldn't quite see that, but I have pictures of when I did do it, and I believe I submitted them to the building department, certainly to DPW and the health department when we got our final sign off. So the addition to 104 is dry use, and there should be no problems with sewage. The apartment on number 5 is going to be a 1-bedroom apartment. It will require 2 parking spaces. The front addition will require 5 parking spaces, and that's rounded up per Mr. Hill. We had it fractional, but it has to be rounded up to 5. So we, of course, will have to go and apply under 197-24 for the variance for the parking, as the rest of the site is grandfathered and was a part of a variance and subdivision that was completed 7 years after it began by myself. When the new owner took it over, it was found. And so we had come to the board in the past and met all the obligations. The one item that has been asked for is that we adhere to 197-16 orientation, scale, architectural consistency. And of course, we will provide drawings by an architect. Alex Badalamenti is going to be the architect of record on this project.
Yes, I see, getting back to 104, you're going west
Correct.
16.8 feet, is that
Correct.
correct?
To the
Okay.
property line.
And you're gonna be right on that park where
Yes.
children walk, where people go to the bocce ball court, where they
Yes.
go back to read.
Yes.
You're gonna be right on the property line. Now, I see that's designated as a proposed porch.
Well, on the front of it, we kind of need to get the transition. That's another important point that we really should clarify. Because we stay under the 50% rule, we don't have to raise the entire structure. We just have to meet the 9-foot top of floor for the new portion.
I understand. I guess my question is, there's been investment by this village in that park, bocce ball court,
Yes,
and they have really beautified it.
it is.
I'm on Main Street every day. I know where your property is. Why would you want to go right on the village's property line where kids walk and they go back and forth? Yet,
Well-
I don't know who you're gonna have in that apartment
This
there.
is kind of why I touched on the privet that's there right now. That privet is approximately 5 foot wide. And so it's growing onto the subject parcel, as well as diminishing the width. And of course, it's very pretty. And the idea of putting the addition on piers allows us to not disturb but up to about 4 foot of the property line. And it was in my mind, how do I preserve the privet? Well, it gets sheared on our side, but left alone on your side. That's why I mentioned privet's very malleable.
But a question for you also is, now on that walking path, there's a line of vision for law enforcement.
This is true.
You're gonna have an obstruction for the line of vision for a police officer to look at that park.
Well, what we did on that regard, that's a very interesting point, is I set the building back so that it's actually 10 feet recessed from the face of Elliman. Now, do keep this in mind. The owner's property actually goes 7 foot forward of Elliman. The owner actually owns 7 feet of that pavement area. So now the privet alone blocks sight line as well. And so the thought was that perhaps that privet could be removed up to the corner of the building, and a nice fence, something, a picket fence, something in the same style of other fences could be done. And right now that privet is 5, 6, 7 foot tall. And incidentally, there's some beautiful cryptomeria just past that privet. And I don't think we're going to disturb the visual at all, because we can do things, as I say. Espalier is a wonderful plant. I think most people don't know of it, where they do it with fruit trees, and it's actually flat. And they're very interesting, and there are espalier junipers and holly and boxwood. And then I mentioned on the backside of Elliman's building is wonderful hydrangea petiolaris, which is a vining hydrangea. And so those things can be addressed in the architectural and the landscape designs. And I get your concern, and of course the the question of photometrics was brought up by the engineer, is that we're not offensive with lighting, we're not offensive with architectural style, but it is a, a conflict where would you like them not to be at 0 lot line? So the way that I came up with at least the construction portion is to do a girder system. It could be steel and sitting on piers, and ideally helical piles is the right way to do it because we're in that zone 7. So we do have to go up to top of floor at 9. And I think that's going to be a great look with a lattice that runs as a skirt around it. And then the idea, of course, the setback and a diminished version of the architectural style, which is what Planner Bistrian suggested as well. But of course, that's code. And we'll get to that. But we did want to make sure that we're beginning the process on the right foot so that we know that, and it's only 16 foot wide is the whole building. So that's why to go to the 0 lot line. But to try not to disturb the park, the way to do that, step in. Don't put in a traditional basement foundation. It's not necessary. There's no function to it, and we'll hit water before we hit usable basement. So now the number 5 doesn't have those issues. And whereas number 5 is got 4 or 5 steps up, we don't have to do that. So the apartment will kind of be like a little villagey feel to it with a step down roof line and forming an L shape facing Glover's. So I too am very concerned about the wonderful Cryptomeria japonica that are there, wonderful plants, those specialty oaks that are there. I've been following everything because I've been working on the property for years now. And I do know about the bocce court and how he hit a clay pan there and had to make special provisions for drainage. So I'm kind of very familiar with the site and I'm guiding the project in that direction. And I will be working with the architect and we'll probably use R&M to do the engineering, who's worked with Mr. Badalmente as well. So we're in the zone, so to speak. We haven't really stepped out of it. The idea that it's expanding, well, both expansions are diminutive. They're smaller than what's there. And so they'll be in harmony with it. And lastly, the Element site, we're expanding a little over 11% lot coverage. So that's a 22% expansion. And on the rear piece, lot 5, or right, lot 2, number 5, that's about 20% increased lot coverage. But it's 1 story, and so too will the addition to the Element building. I know I have a lot of things to present to you in the future, but we will then get those things for you.
Yes, Brad?
Did you get my comments from December?
I got Britton Bistrian's and Ron Hill's. I don't know that I received yours.
Okay, so let's start with 3 or 5 lovers. So it's true, there is 0 setback for the front and the side. There's a 25-foot setback for the rear. So that's one major issue. The reason why there's a 25-foot setback for the rear is so you can provide some sort of parking on this. Second issue with this concept, and why I didn't know if it was a 2-story or not, is first floor apartments are not permitted in the downtown. It's
I'm sorry, first floor.
first floor apartments are not permitted in the downtown.
I see.
So not only does this addition doesn't meet the rear yard setback, the use it doesn't work either, and you're also eliminating any sort of space that you could possibly park in. Now, 104 Main Street. Your plan shows elevating the main building up it says existing first floor 8.4, proposed first floor 9.
The
There is a
existing,
way to do horizontal additions under FEMA. the 50% rule still complies, and I don't know if you remember or heard me correctly, but like, I don't think you're getting to this major addition without making this.
Well, you had mentioned the number of that you had about 800 and change on that building. And this 830 square foot dry use, it's gonna come in well under 50%.
I don't think so. I think you have a major FEMA issue on 104 if you're not prepared to raise that building, as I told you, before you and your client even bought the property. And 3 and 5, well, we're gonna call it whatever, we're calling it 3, but it's 5 in my records. That doesn't meet the zoning at all. The other thing with these massive additions that you're proposing for these very small sites is where you're putting your drainage and where you're putting your parking. It's just, it's already pretty well developed. And this is, you're saying they're small, but these are not small additions for the available land you have on the site. I don't think we're starting on the right foot at all, but that's the end of my comments.
And the big
you have
problem
to
with
make cer-
parking is that, so you have an existing non-conforming condition in which you have a developed property, you have 2 developed properties that both have, not even that they're deficient parking, they actually have 0 parking. So you have a condition in which you have a non-conformity in that you have no parking, but that doesn't exempt you from adding on to those buildings and having to provide parking.
No,
So we don't want to make a condition that's already non-conforming worse. That's the purpose of zoning, is to become more conforming over time. So it's really hard for me to even get out of the starting gate with a property that has no parking. in
Like
a-
the first application of the night, you were here, I don't know if you were here when the first application was on. They are proposing some more space, but they're proposing several more parking spaces.
right.
So the net is an
Again.
improvement compared to the grandfathered lack of parking.
Well, but grandfathered is grandfathered.
Right, but that doesn't
Yeah, but-
allow you to add, and then if you add and everybody else who doesn't have parking says, well,
We could add.
they did it on 104 and 5, you know, I'm using that as precedent, so the whole village now has a larger parking problem. That's what we're up against.
In other words, that their application was generating a need for 3 more parking spaces, but they're providing 5 more. You're generating a need for more parking spaces and providing 0.
Well, that's where 19724 kicks in, no? That we can go and pay for the $6,500?
If you get a variance, but
Correct.
that doesn't mean that the zoning board just hands variances away, especially in this area where there's a sensitivity to the need for parking. I mean, it's not impossible to ask them for it, but it's all gonna go into the equation that the board, are you overburdening, overtaxing this property, which is already pre-existing non-conforming? It makes for a much tougher application all around to do that, but you're right, you can always ask for variance. There's no,
That's what I thought.
can't
that-
tell you that you're not allowed to ask for it, but it's all ask and not much give in terms of trying to balance.
And the zoning board will typically want to know how the planning board feels about it when we talk about parking variance. So it is partially up to this board as well.
So the idea of achieving a variance is something that can be asked for, but it is weighed in the context of how much relief you had gotten by pre-existing conditions.
Well, I can't speak for the zoning board. I mean, you're,
Well, but that's the
there's
implication.
and I assume you've been through zoning board variances before. You have to prove how the impacts on the village or your benefits outweigh the impacts on the village. I think what you're seeing is there's a pretty substantial impact for this project to not, to go in and ask for variance and say, just give it to me.
Well, I guess
It may be a difficult application. to
I
make, that's all.
suppose it was my reading of 197 that this was a standard method of dealing with a parking constraint when a property was constrained.
It's not like if you're imagining it as all I have to do is pay for a variance, it's not that. You still have to make your case for a variance,
Of course.
but the zoning board has to include that as a condition of any variance it gives, but you still have to make the case for it. So,
And just one more comment, the threshold is very high, especially on 104, in terms of the architectural integrity to Main Street. Right now, you have a beautiful old facade. It's been added on to over time. It's a very typical iconographic Hamptons commercial property that was once probably a residence and had a lean-to and all these other uses. So it's very important what that addition does and looks like. So we haven't seen that. But it's also important that open space that it has, that alleyway to see through to the back. And however, I mean, I've been in construction for 28 years. Building a zero lot line, even on helical piles, the curbing for the entrance to the park is on that lot line as well. I don't see how you don't excavate into the village property. I don't see how you actually logistically build on a property line without damaging the neighbor's property. We're talking about hedges, but it's really the sidewalk, it's the entrance to the park. It's a very important part of Main Street. So if we are moving forward, it's very important for us to see what that actually looks like and the visual impact of that addition. Right now on paper, flat paper from above, it looks too large.
Too
Large.
large. I suppose that retail space that's less than, and you were talking interior wise, less than 15 foot wide is not a very desirable.
Well, you also need to make it handicap accessible, which I don't know how you're required to do that. That's gonna take a ramp, it's a big plate off grade. There's a lot of thinking that needs to go into what that street front looks like.
Handicap access ramp could be at the back of the addition.
Also, I do recall when we did, the bakery, which went lot line to lot line, and actually went building to building, literally. There was a lot of discussion about how are you gonna maintain the outside without trespassing on other people's property? I mean, so there was a lot of discussion, because there was a antagonism with with the boys' property. There was discussion, how are you gonna maintain this without trespassing on other people's property? And that was a lot, we spent a lot of time discussing that.
And I don't know how you maintain a hedge up against the facade either.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting that that's not really the appropriate plant material once this were to be added. That's something more in the line of,
But where would you plant that plant material? The facade of the building sits on the property line. You're suggesting you're gonna plant on village property on and cut up the sidewalk?
well, again, the, the plant, the ligustrum that's there is growing both ways. So it's growing halfway onto the applicant's property. And privet in particular, as I said, is a very malleable plant. And it's also used as an espalier as well. An espalier can be that thick, 3 inches thick. And boxwood is a wonderful espalier, and a lot of vining plants are too.
Right. Even if 3 inches, if you build a building on the property line, you don't have 3 inches that's not your property.
Well, this is
Doesn't
where
matter how thin the plant is.
engineering would be very critical, and why I've come up with the pier system, where those piers are actually set 4 foot inside the property line.
That's an address.
Plants are actually planted on the actual stem.
Of the root ball,
They usually plant a foot off the property line.
they should have. I don't know that they did. It's 16.5 feet, and if you'll pull,
You never get to the top, and looking at the surveys, squiggly lines around the property line, but usually it's planted a foot, and I'm questioning whether it's on village property, the actual stem, or on your property. And, when you're talking about the hedge, you really need to know where the plant stem is and roots, which side of the property line. Well,
I think we've got bigger fish to fry, though. I mean,
well, especially on number 5.
yeah,
I was not aware of the no living space on the first floor. And in that, it would be compliant in that footprint, certainly to build the apartment as a second floor apartment and leave underneath it. as a-
3 yard setback.
Oh, from, as well, so the sky plane.
And principal uses you can have based on the lot. Now, professional offices don't count, but personal service shops, which you have a couple of over there, they count. So be 2,000 square feet of land per use. I don't think that northerly property would support another use on the first floor. And it definitely doesn't support, the apartment, and then you also have the rear yard setback issue and any parking. Like, is there a world where you could do an addition on 104? Potentially, but I think that means a scale back addition, and you provide more parking between the lots, not two additions.
And no parking.
And no parking, and then there's drainage too. I know we reutilize whatever drainage we had there, but, okay, now once we build on that and that drainage goes away, now where are we putting the rest of all the new, roof loads? So, I apologize if you didn't get this back in December. I'll make sure we, send it to you tomorrow, but it outlines a lot of these major issues, I think.
Well, it certainly would have had to rethink everything on number 5. If you're considering that a rear yard,
You get a front yard, a side yard, you have to have a rear yard somewhere. 104, yeah, 104, Main Street is a front yard, Glover's is a front yard. The, westerly against the park can be a side yard, so I'm okay with that being 0. The northerly setback is now, that's where you're 25 feet. Your proposed addition does meet the rear yard on 104, so that wasn't identified in here. But on the other lot, I don't see any way to build an addition to that building without a setback.
or that we show you the cost of this and that we meet that 50%, which you have doubts on.
Very complicated. It's not just, goes into what this building is actually worth, replacement costs. We go by the Southampton Town Assessor's appraisal, and I think I gave you that number, and
Yeah, but
was it that much?
so that's why.
And then the addition is not just the cost of the addition, it's also improvement cost. So your survey shows a proposed first floor. Your survey that you submitted, which is really the site plan, I guess, is showing that you were prepared to elevate that. So if you're not prepared to elevate that, make sure that's clear on your application.
All right, and perhaps it was not clear, but it certainly was never the intention to raise that building. It's not even remotely possible.
Then I believe additions to the building are not remotely possible if that's talking.
Well, we only had to go up one extra step, one riser to hit elevation 9. So we thought, based on our conversation back in, I guess that was October, that
It's still part of the building. Additions is still part of the building. It still has to meet the 50%.
well, you're saying 104 could meet as long as it's 50% of the current value.
It's a more complicated conversation than what we can have now with this board. But it's definitely has to be
You
looked
should
at.
You're
do
welcome
is,
to come in and meet with Brad and I. We can sit down with you and walk you through it.
first thing, accept the notes that Brad gets to you
Sure.
tomorrow and give them a good study, and then make an appointment and come in and maybe hash this through a little bit. It's a little half-baked at the moment.
I sent you an email, it went to your spam or whatever.
I did get both of them when you sent me, when you sent them, I got the notes from Mr. Hill and I got the notes from Ms. Bistrom. Yeah, well, I did get that. That was the one that gave me the engineering fee. Yeah, so I, all that. I did not ever receive these notes from Brad, and would have definitely altered the way we were thinking, at least on number 5, number 3, whatever. Your gut is that there's no way to do the 25-foot setback. Now, the building is non-conforming right now then.
Not looking to
Correct.
make that worse.
Okay.
And remember, this property came to this board not that long ago to be subdivided, so it could be sold with variances that were granted. And there's a lot of discussion about how well overdeveloped this whole site is. You know, you saw how they try to sneak all that drainage in just to get the subdivision done so they could get their sanitary system done. And then luckily, the
Sewers, yeah.
sewer got far enough along where the health department granted the subdivision. But this is a packed two properties. I think it's pretty well developed already, and you don't have a lot of parking.
Well, we don't have to do this here.
Okay.
So if
Right.
you would accept Mr. Brad's email tomorrow, give it a good study. And we look forward to seeing you again in.
Great. All right, thanks
Next
very
time.
much. I'm
Thank
sorry to take
Not at
your
all.
time if this was
It was very educational. Lots of good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you all.
Yeah, we'll talk to them.
Okay, we've got minutes from January 9th,
Motion to accept the minutes.
second.
All in favor?
Aye. Um, We need a discussion on the,
Just a quick look ahead, it's pretty easy next time. Two public hearings, 55, 59 Old Riverhead Road is a public hearing, and 128 Main Street, who you had tonight. We could potentially, be putting them on for resolution, just depending on the outcome, so it'll be a little lighter.
Mr. Hafley may come back.
Always hope.
That's the late.
Okay,
59, I know they.
Motion to close?
make a motion. All in favor?
Aye.